Coming up tonight, police yet to grant permit to the Methodist Church of Fiji for meeting. 10 Fijian hostages released and Ready Action Unit opens its doors to students. Good evening, I'm Sandra Assam. A decision is expected to be made later this month on whether the Methodist Church of Fiji can hold their annual conference.
The Methodist Church of Fiji will know next week whether or not they have been given the go-ahead to hold their 2 standing committee meetings before their annual conference. Speaking to Fiji News this morning, Church Assistant General Secretary Reverend Tevita Nawandra says they had sought approval from police to hold their 2 standing committee meetings in June and July. Meanwhile, Fiji Police Force Director Operations SSP Rusiate Tundravu reveals that they are maintaining their earlier stand on the issue regarding the permit application by the Methodist Church of Fiji. SSP Tundravu says the Commissioner of Police is considering the application and will make a decision accordingly once he returns from an official tour of Hong Kong. The Commissioner is once again giving his assurance that he is considering the application and he will inform the executives of the church on a date for the meeting. Under the amended Public Order Act, the Commissioner of Police is the only one that has the power to issue or revoke a permit for a meeting.
Overseas media report that 10 Fijian members of the multinational force and observers were kidnapped on Monday by the Bedouin to try to secure the release of fellow tribesmen from prison. However, the 10 Fijian members of the MFO have been released after the tribesmen received assurances that their demands would be met.
Egyptian security sources says the remote Sinai region has descended further into lawlessness since a popular uprising ousted Egypt's president more than a year ago and threw the security apparatus into disarray. The abductors reportedly demanded the authorities release from prison several fellow tribesmen, some of whom had been convicted of terrorism. In March, Bedouin blocked access to the MFO's North Camp at Algora for a day to press for tribesmen's release. They pulled back after giving officials a month to examine their demands. Bedouin tribes in Sinai have long-standing grievances with central government. Fiji provides an infantry battalion whose mission is to observe and report all activities in the northern sector of Zone C, which includes the major border crossing at Rafah, Kerem Shalom and Al Ogwad Nizana. The MFO is an independent force formed to monitor the borders between Egypt and Israel following the 1979 peace accord. It consists of military staff from 12 countries, including the US and France.
A first batch of volunteers under the Fiji Volunteers Service signed their contract letters and oath of office at the Public Service Commission this morning. The 10 volunteers comprising of retirees and graduates will be engaged with the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Health.
The volunteer scheme is under the National Employment Centre decree initiated to reform the management of employment creation services under the Labour Ministry. The Fiji Volunteer Service is part and parcel of the Employment Creation Services. Today, 2 categories were signed, which involves unemployed graduate trainee volunteers. This scheme is meant for the unemployed but qualified graduates who can be exposed to work experience, a sense of purpose and civic pride through enlisting and working as a volunteer. The second category, the senior volunteer, involves the recruitment of qualified and experienced volunteers such as retirees to serve locally in identified fields such as education, food and nutrition, community health, environment and agriculture.
So I would like to thank the 10 volunteers who have put their hands up to undertake assignments for Ministry of Education and Ministry of Health. The ones in Ministry of Education will be assigned to help with the post-processing unit of the ministry to assist in capacity building in the area of education. The ones in health would serve in the area of community health and rehabilitation, because this is a very important area for Fiji.
In presenting the volunteers with their documents, Public Service Commission Permanent Secretary Parmesh Chand says the civil service will benefit greatly from the knowledge and skills that the volunteers will bring in, imparting on matters of national interest and development. The third category is the Senior Volunteer Regional, which involves recruitment of senior volunteers to serve in Pacific Island countries. This was not signed today, but will be completed soon, with Vanuatu being the first country in which Fiji's first group of volunteers will serve.
But the intent under the law is to provide opportunities for people to do regional and international volunteers as well. So today begins the local volunteers, and then yes, hopefully in the near future, particularly through MSG, we've our leaders have committed to moving our people through the MSG member countries. So hopefully volunteers can also move along the MSG nations as well. But we're beginning with the MSG, as you know, with the skilled labor movement. So yes, of course, that's another wonderful opportunity that's available for the Fiji volunteers as well.
The volunteers have a separate budget under the Public Service Commission that is provided by government through arrangement of cost sharing with PSC and line ministries.
Coming up after the break, humanitarian organization mobilizes to help flood victims. And National Fire Authority carries out more awareness.